Betrayal doesn't arrive screaming. It shows up quietly, listening, complimenting, agreeing with everything. And that's exactly why it slips past your defenses. Because the real traitor doesn't walk in like an enemy. He comes in as your reflection. Someone who knows your weak spots, shares your vision, holds your hand while guiding you straight into the dark. And by the time you realize what's happening, the ground beneath you is already gone. The mistake isn't in trusting. It's in trusting without testing, in confusing presence with loyalty, words with commitment, affection with roots. Most men who've been betrayed weren't blindsided. They were warned, subtly, quietly, repeatedly. But they ignored the signs, the little ones, the nearly invisible ones. And if you've trained yourself to stay silent just to keep the peace, chances are you've also trained yourself to overlook what screams in silence. The way out isn't to distrust everyone. It's to observe with cold clarity and move without hesitation, because loyalty is revealed under pressure. And betrayal? It always starts where things feel safest. In this video, you'll learn the 7 early warning signs that show up before every collapse. You'll discover how to test them with precision. And most importantly, you'll learn how to build a system where being fake is expensive and standing beside you becomes a privilege, not a routine. And if you stay until the end, you'll uncover an 8th type, the most subtle of them all, the one almost no one sees coming, until it's far too late. Let's start with one of the most treacherous patterns, because it looks harmless. Some men don't betray you with words, they betray you with absence. They agree with everything, clap for your small victories, and seem to always be around. But the moment the boat starts rocking, they go silent. They don't disagree. They don't confront. They just disappear. And they do it so subtly you even wonder if maybe you expected too much, but you didn't. You just expected something from someone who was never truly there to begin with. It's easy to mistake this type of man for someone reliable. After all, he's always around during light conversations, safe moments, easy decisions. But when the moment calls for risk, for truth, for exposure, he fades. And that's when you realize you've never heard an honest opinion, never seen a bold move, never felt him stand firm without something in return. The silent supporter doesn't mess up because he's evil. He simply refuses to pay the price loyalty demands. Machiavelli understood that silence can be just as dangerous as opposition, and that apparent obedience often hides calculation, not loyalty. It's like a guard who stays at his post until the enemy shows up. Then he just watches. In real life, this is the colleague who never challenges you, but never defends you either. The business partner who praises you, but won't hold the line when pressure hits. The friend who says, "I got your back," but never proves it. If you want to test this type, there's no need for confrontation. Just make a hard decision, something that requires him to take a visible stand, a real gesture, and you'll see it. He'll hesitate, stall, deflect. Because the silent traitor doesn't want to lose the comfort of neutrality. He won't stab you. He'll just let you bleed alone. And that kind of abandonment is the most common betrayal among men who claim to be strong, but can't stand being seen in a storm. Now here's an even sneakier one. Because it disguises itself as presence but operates more like surveillance. Some people never shut up, yet you still have no idea who they really are. They're always around, always talking, always reacting to everything. But somehow they never actually say anything real. The endless communication becomes a smokescreen, a way to stay close while remaining untouchable. And the most dangerous part? It feels like intimacy, but it's really control. Control disguised as attention. This person comments on everything, checks in constantly, sends messages full of empathy. But they never truly open up. They never share a raw pain, never take a strong stance. Instead, they create a constant flow of micro-interactions without ever building a real bridge. And without even noticing, you start to trust them. After all, someone who's always around must care, right? Not always. Sometimes they're just sticking close to map out your vulnerabilities. Machiavelli said that true control doesn't need to be imposed. It can be crafted through perception. And the compulsive communicator is a master at that. He doesn't confront, he collects. He's always listening, but only gives back what suits his role. He's always complimenting, but never really committed. He's the guy who says, "I'm here for you," but disappears the second you ask, "For what?" He doesn't want connection. He wants access. Want to test this type? Slow the pace. Stop replying for a while. See if they keep showing up with the same energy, or if your silence makes them vanish. Because the most sophisticated kind of traitor doesn't create conflict. He creates dependence. And the day you stop feeding the conversation, he disappears. Because what he wanted was never you, it was your radar turned off. This next behavior is as common as it is devastating, because it doesn't break things apart. It just slowly pulls away. Betrayal doesn't begin with a strike. It starts with a barely noticeable shift, a delayed response, a slight change in tone, an invitation that no longer comes, a plan that used to be shared, now treated like a solo mission. You notice it, but pretend you don't. Because there's no confrontation, no explanation, just that growing discomfort, like something's pulling away from inside someone who still claims to stand beside you. This kind of distance is the most dangerous, because it doesn't hurt all at once. It confuses you, makes you question yourself, makes you think maybe it's all in your head, maybe it's just a phase, maybe all bonds go through ups and downs. But if you pay attention, you'll start seeing the pattern. The dialogue becomes more functional. The conversations, shorter. We turns into I. And suddenly, you're the only one fighting for a connection that's no longer being held from the other side. Machiavelli didn't see this as weakness, but as strategy. A slow retreat gives the traitor time. Time to build new alliances, test other paths, prepare the ground for a quiet replacement. All of it without triggering any direct conflict. Because the more subtle the separation, the easier it is to justify later. It just happened, he'll say. But none of it just happened. It was calculated. A silent transition dressed as coincidence. Want to spot this type? Stop looking for proof. Start noticing what's missing. What's no longer being said? Which plans stopped getting mentioned? Which words quietly vanished from their vocabulary? Pitch something simple, like a shared vision for the future. See if they include themselves, or if they answer like it's no longer their concern. Because the subtle drifter doesn't scream. He fades. Until one day, you realize you've been standing alone in a story you thought was still being written by two. There's a type of loyal man who seems solid until the ground starts to shake. He doesn't abandon you. He just can't stay. Some people look like they're truly by your side. They support you. They listen. They even get emotional hearing your story. But the moment a storm hits, they vanish. Not out of anger, not even out of fear, but because they were never rooted. They were with you, but never for you. Like leaves resting on a tree, until the wind shifts. And the most dangerous part? They're gone, but still say, "I'm here if you need me." This kind of loyalty can't handle friction. It's present while everything flows, but it dissolves when things get heavy. It's the colleague who disappears under pressure, the friend who never checks in when you're losing, the partner who only believes in you when you're winning. And the biggest mistake? Blaming yourself for their absence, thinking it's your job to keep people like this close. It's not. They were there for what they could gain, and when the gain ran out, so did they. Machiavelli saw this with brutal clarity. He warned that mercenary troops should never be the foundation of any empire, because those who fight for pay never die for a cause. And the same goes for personal alliances. Trusting someone who has nothing to lose for you is a trap. These men switch sides without blinking. They adapt to new rules. They're quick, agreeable, charming. But inside, hollow. No principle that costs anything. If you want to know whether someone's truly loyal or just convenient, run a test. Introduce discomfort. Remove the spotlight. Close the door. Take away the benefit. The ones with roots will stay. The ones who are just leaves will drift off without even saying goodbye. And the worst part? Most of them will leave with the same gentle smile they had when they arrived. No guilt, no explanation. Just off to wherever there's more sun, more shade, or a bigger audience. Now we reach one of the hardest types to spot, because they're always there, but never where it counts. Some people seem deeply involved. They're always watching, always listening, always ready with an opinion when asked. But they never move on their own. They know every detail, understand the dynamics, they know exactly what to say. But they never put their skin in the game, never commit to the cause, never take a stand when it might cost them something. They're like shadows, present but untouchable, and this strategic neutrality was almost always a mask for either cowardice or hidden intention. This is the kind of ally who never disagrees, but also never truly supports. They're in the room but not in the fight. They might clap when you speak, but they'll stay silent when you're under attack, and when you fall, they'll say they didn't want to get involved. That's the silent bystander, someone who stays close, not out of loyalty, but out of convenience. And the more intense the situation gets, the more absent they become. Because in their world, silence is a shield, not a sign of respect. Machiavelli knew that men like this exist not because they're unaware, but because they're afraid to take a side, or worse. They're just waiting for the right moment to switch sides. They don't fail out of distraction. They calculate. They remain in the middle where the risk is lowers and the information flows freely, and that makes them dangerous, because the traitor who acts can be seen, but the one who observes, he's invisible, and therefore much harder to predict or stop. Want to know if you're dealing with one of them? Watch how they behave when tension rises. Do they react or just watch? When injustice happens, do they speak up or hide behind not knowing the whole story? Because the man who stays silent when you're under attack has already made his choice. He chose not to stand, and anyone who refuses to take a stand was never really with you. He was just close enough to know exactly how to leave when it all falls apart. Then there's the one who doesn't need to dominate, because he disarms you. Not with force, but with attention, with calculated empathy. Not every emotional bond is real. Sometimes it's just a strategy for entry. The emotional infiltrator is the kind of man who listens better than anyone. He pays attention. He seems genuinely interested. He offers advice. He seems sensitive. And slowly, you start to trust him. You open up. You tell him things you wouldn't tell anyone else. But strangely, you know almost nothing about him. He listened to your chaos while hiding his own. And that's not care, that's calculation. These relationships always begin fast. He feels close, present, supportive. But over time, you notice something off. The conversations always revolve around you, your pain, your doubts, your failures. He listens like he's healing you, but in truth, he's indexing you. And by the time things go south, he knows exactly where to strike. The infiltrator isn't looking for connection. He's looking for emotional access. And the more you speak, the more he studies. Machiavelli called this gathering. He understood that emotional intel is more powerful than political intel. Because weakness shared willingly, there always becomes a weapon eventually. And this kind of traitor is refined. He won't yell, he won't accuse, he won't force, he suggests. He turns your own words against you. He manipulates using the very stories you told in sincerity, believing they were safe. Want to catch one of these? Flip the script. Ask a direct personal question, one that requires real vulnerability. Watch his response. If it's vague, evasive, overly philosophical, watch out. Someone who only listens but never shares isn't building a bond, they're building leverage. And when the time is right, they'll use your past as ammunition to shame you, blame you, or disappear, wearing that same understanding expression that once made you trust them. And finally, there's the one who never confronts, because he doesn't need to win by force. He wins through consent. Some of the most dangerous men you'll ever meet never raise their voice, never slam the table, never attack you directly. They don't shout. They don't threaten. They don't impose. They seduce. Gently. Logically, with subtle charm, and the worst part, they make you believe you're still in control, that the decisions are still yours, but inside they've already taken over. They just haven't made the announcement yet. Because the peaceful manipulator doesn't break walls, he moves fences without you noticing. This kind of traitor will never be remembered as aggressive, because he's polite, helpful, well-mannered. He never denies, but never confirms. He never argues, just changes the subject. Never confronts, just neutralizes. His strength lies in ambiguity. in the fact that you can't quite point out what's wrong. You just feel like you've lost something, something invisible, like your authority, your energy, or your direction. Machiavelli understood that forced agreement often holds more power than declared victory, and that's exactly what the peaceful manipulator seeks. Not your defeat, but your surrender disguised as choice. He'll offer you what you want to hear, reinforce what you want to believe, guide you as if you asked for it, and by the time you realize what's happening, you won't remember when you stopped deciding for yourself. Want to spot him? Try opposing him in public. Watch closely. He won't get offended. He'll laugh. He'll deflect. He'll downplay. But deep down, he'll take note. And sooner or later, he'll start quietly dismantling your image. A joke here, a doubt there, a compliment laced with criticism. And when people start looking at you differently, it'll already be too late, because he's emptied you without ever lifting a finger. And before we close, there's one last type that wasn't on the list, yet it silently destroys more bonds than all the others combined. It's the kind of traitor who doesn't break alliances simply because they never truly built any. There's a form of betrayal that doesn't come from hate, envy, or frustration, but from lightness, from the complete absence of depth. This is the person who says they're with you, not because they believe in you, but because at that moment, being by your side is easy, convenient, or profitable. There's no cause, no roots, and that's why they can drift in any direction, at any moment, without guilt, without explanation, and worst of all, thinking it's perfectly okay. This shallow form of loyalty looks a lot like the real thing. It wears the mask of presence, support, even praise. But you feel it, even if only subconsciously, that it's too light to be trusted. As if deep down they always have one foot out the door, waiting, measuring, weighing. This is the kind of ally who vanishes without a word when everything falls apart. And when you see them again, they're already applauding someone else, with the same enthusiasm they once gave to you. Machiavelli deeply distrusted this kind of connection. To him, a man unwilling to suffer for you will never hesitate to abandon you when you become the burden. He compared them to hired soldiers. They fight as long as they're paid, but they die for no one. And the truth is, many men today are surrounded by these figures, companions who would never bleed with you, but demand you celebrate with them. Want to know if someone fits this pattern? Introduce small costs, nothing big. Just remove a privilege, a convenience, an advantage. Watch what happens. The ones with roots will stay. The ones there for comfort will wilt, withdraw, or take offense. True loyalty reveals itself in discomfort, and the opportunist reveals himself in the silence that follows your shift. Because in the end, he never truly wanted to stay. He just wanted to enjoy the benefits while it was easy. You don't need to confront directly those you suspect. You need to observe who reveals themselves when the ground shifts. It's easy to appear loyal when everything is comfortable. The real test is whether the bond holds when things go off script. That's why the most effective way to test someone's loyalty is to quietly rearrange the structure, change their access, alter the routine, make unexpected decisions, and watch. Because the traitor can't survive discomfort, he needs predictability to keep operating. Start demanding actions, not words. Most of the signs you've spotted so far hide behind speech. Polished scripts, rehearsed responses, perfectly timed compliments. But when you say do instead of say, the entire scene changes. Many will hesitate, deflect, or deliver half-heartedly. What once seemed like support collapses into resistance, because talk is cheap, but action demands roots. Another powerful form of prevention is to trigger small, controlled tensions. Nothing destructive, just enough friction to see who flinches. Ask uncomfortable questions, demand clarity where ambiguity once lived. Intentionally reveal a flaw of your own, and then watch who uses it later. Machiavelli once said that human nature reveals itself when people think no one is watching. And in those moments, false allies expose themselves without realizing it. And finally, understand this. Prevention isn't about creating paranoia. It's about building systems. Systems where loyalty is visible, and betrayal is too costly to be worth it. create layers, rotation, distributed autonomy, because the man who depends too much on one has already placed himself at the mercy of others, and those who fail to see this in time eventually wake up surrounded by faces that were never truly there. Machiavelli never trusted human nature alone because he knew human nature shifts with time, with context, with cost. That's why he never built loyalty on affection, but on structure. Real power doesn't lie in inspiring loyalty. It lies in designing a system where betrayal is always riskier than staying, where the incentives to remain outweigh the temptations to defect, where trust isn't a feeling, but it's a mechanism. This is what most men ignore. They expect unconditional loyalty. While building fragile, predictable, centralized systems, they become dependent on one or two pillars. They share sensitive information with people they never truly tested. They concentrate power without distributing responsibility. And when betrayal comes, it's catastrophic. Not because it was committed, but because it was allowed. It was silently built by the blind architecture of someone who thought the bond was strong. Protecting yourself from betrayal isn't about living in paranoia. It's about living with structure. Rotate access. Decentralize decisions. Never share your source of influence fully with someone who hasn't been tested through scarcity. And above all, never let anyone sense that you need them to function, because a traitor only strikes when he believes his absence will be felt, and the true strategist never allows himself to become essential. Savonarola believed the love of the people would protect him. He built his reign on promises, charisma, and public devotion. But all it took was a rumor, a hesitation, a change in weather, and the same crowd that once applauded him lit the fire beneath his feet. Because power built on emotion is a castle of sand. And what Machiavelli concluded coldly was this: never lean on affection, build on interest. And when the interest shifts, make sure the next ground is already prepared. When betrayal is confirmed, most men fail at the most critical moment, the reaction. They act on impulse. They confront, expose, yell, punish, and by doing so that they give up control. Because every traitor, consciously or not, craves a scene, a stage, a reason. And true power doesn't lie in humiliation. It lies in withdrawal, in quietly removing the space that made that person feel important. No warning, no noise, just an absence that weighs heavier than any public punishment. Strategic execution happens without spectacle. You don't argue, you don't announce, you simply reposition, revoke access, diminish relevance, silence their presence. It's like extinguishing a candle without blowing. No one hears the end, but everyone feels the darkness. And the traitor, who expected to cause impact, dissolves into irrelevance. That silence inspires more fear, more caution, and more respect than any loud retaliation ever could. In ancient Rome, traitors were often punished symbolically, not just executed, but erased from history. Their names removed from records. Their achievements credited to others. This wasn't just revenge. It was a message to those who remained. Machiavelli studied these gestures as tools of instruction. A traitor should not be remembered. He should be turned into a void. Because the fear of being forgotten lasts far longer than the fear of pain. And if you ever reach this point, don't hesitate. But don't explain either. The removal must be precise, silent, and final. No noise, no resentment, no hunger for justice. Because a true strategist doesn't seek revenge. He protects what he's built. And whoever failed to respect that excluded themselves long before your decision. You're just signing off what they already wrote with their own actions. Almost no one sees betrayal as it happens, because it doesn't come with a knife, and it comes with presence, with compliments, with that quiet, "I've got your back." It doesn't break the door. It slips through the cracks. And that's why most people only understand what they lived through, when it's already too late. When they look back and realize the signs were all there, but ignored out of convenience, fear, or misplaced loyalty. And that's the heaviest weight to carry, knowing you fooled yourself. The truth is, as most men aren't betrayed by enemies, they're betrayed by allies who became spectators, by partners who got lost in their own agendas, by friends who stopped valuing what you were building together. And when that happens, The damage isn't just external, so it's internal. It starts hurting where trust used to live. It corrodes your perception of people. And if you don't move with strategy, it starts hardening something inside you. But there is a way forward that doesn't require revenge or total isolation. Structure, silence, clarity. You don't need to become paranoid. You need to become someone who observes, adjusts, tests, and doesn't hesitate when the other person has already made their choice. Because most men don't fall out of naivete. They fall from hesitation, from trying to believe in something that's already proven false. And your turning point begins the moment you accept that the mistake wasn't trusting. It was keeping someone close who had already walked away in silence. If any part of this video spoke what you've never been able to say, if you felt like this wasn't just content, but an accurate reading of what you've lived through in silence, then subscribe. This channel isn't about motivation. It's about clarity. And here what you feel, even if you never say a word, has a name, has an explanation, and has an answer.